July 29th, 1966. A phone rings in a military barracks. The voice says,
Ironsi is dead. You're now head of state.
The man on the other end, 31-year-old lieutenant colonel, he wasn't even in the top 10 for the job. So, how did Yakubu Gowon, a complete nobody, become Nigeria's leader? Let's rewind 24 hours before that phone call. It was July 28th, 1966. General Aguiyi-Ironsi is Nigeria's head of state. He's staying at the government house for a governor's meeting. At midnight, around 2 a.m., northern soldiers storm the building. They drag Ironsi out in his pajamas. They tied him to a Land Rover, shot him 78 times, then buried him in a shallow grave near Ivo Road. His aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi, also dead. Now here's the insane part nobody tells you. Gowon wasn't even supposed to be in Lagos that night. He was scheduled to be in Ibadan with Ironsi. But 48 hours earlier, he got reassigned to Lagos. Pure luck or something else? Coincidence or setup? The mutiny wasn't just about Ironsi. Northern officers wanted revenge for January 15th. 6 months earlier, Igbo majors killed northern leaders in a coup. The Sardauna of Sokoto? Dead. Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa? Dead. The North wanted blood, and they got it. By sunrise on July 29th, dozens of Igbo officers were dead, thrown off bridges, shot in barracks and burned alive. Nigeria was on fire. But here's where it gets crazy. The mutineers had no plan for who becomes head of state. They just knew not another Igbo, not another Southerner, and definitely not Ironsi's obvious successor. So who do they pick? A 31-year-old Christian from a Middle Belt tribe. But 72 hours later, his decision changed Nigeria forever. On the morning of July 29th, 1966, Lagos was in chaos. Soldiers are hunting Igbo officers in barracks. Civilians are hiding in their homes. And Yakubu Gowon? He's locked in a room at Dodan Barrack with the men who just murdered the head of state. Here's what happened in that room. Lieutenant Colonel Murtala Mohammed storms in. He was covered in blood. He was one of the mutiny leaders. He looks at Gowon and says,
We need a head of state by noon.
Gowon is terrified. He's thinking, am I next? But then Murtala says something wild.
It's you. You're the head of state.
Gowon's response?
I'm not senior enough.
And he was right. There were at least 8 officers senior to him. Brigadier Ogundipe was the most senior, but he was Yoruba. The North didn't trust him. Colonel Ojukwu controlled the East, too powerful. Colonel Hassan Katsina was Northern, but seen as too soft. So why Gowon? 3 reasons. He was Christian. The British loved that. He was from a minority tribe. No regional power base. He was young, easy to control, or so they thought. But here's the part that'll blow your mind. Gowon didn't want the job. For the first 3 hours, he refused. He told Murtala,
Give it to Ogundipe. He's senior.
Murtala's response? Unprintable. By 1 p.m., Gowon was still saying no. Then someone whispered something in his ear. 1 sentence. He never revealed what it was. But 5 minutes later, he accepted. By 2 p.m., Gowon was on radio announcing he's head of state. His voice was shaking. He looked like a man at his own funeral. But within 48 hours, he'd make one decision that killed 2 million people. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Did the British pick Gowon? Here's what we know. 3 days before Ironsi died, British diplomats met with northern officers. Declassified files from 2003 confirmed this. The topic? Post-Ironsi succession. The British had a problem. Nigeria was their biggest African investment. Oil was just discovered in the Niger Delta. If Nigeria collapsed, Britain loses billions. They needed someone who'd keep Nigeria together and keep British oil companies happy. Gowon was the perfect puppet, or so they thought. Within 24 hours of taking power, Gowon made 3 moves. He released all detained northern officers. He appointed Murtala Muhammad as his deputy. He sent a secret telegram to London. The message?
I need military aid, fast.
But here's what nobody tells you. Gowon wasn't asking for help to stop a civil war. He was asking for help to start one. Because at this exact moment, Colonel Ojukwu was planning something that would tear Nigeria apart. The eastern region was about to seize it. And Gowon knew it. On August 9th, 1967, less than a year after taking power, Ojukwu declared Biafra independent. Civil war was inevitable. But here's the twisted part. Some historians say Gowon wanted the war. Why? Because it would prove he was a strong leader. It would silence anyone who called him a puppet, and it would make the North love him. Did it work? For 9 years, Gowon ruled Nigeria longer than any leader before him. But the price? 3 million dead, and one decision haunted him forever. In January 1967 in Ghana, Gowon and Ojukwu sit face to face. This meeting was to prevent a civil war. It was called the Aburi Accord. And Gowon agreed to everything Ojukwu wanted, which was decentralization, regional autonomy, and no revenge killings. They shook hands and smiled for cameras. Gowon flew back to Lagos and told the press,
We have peace.
But 2 weeks later, he ripped up the agreement. Why? Because his northern advisors told him,
You gave away too much.
Murtala Muhammad reportedly said,
If you honor Aburi, we'll remove you.
Gowon was trapped. Honor the deal? Lose northern support. Break the deal? Civil war. He chose war. On May 27th, 1967, Gowon announced the creation of 12 states. This broke up the regions, including the East. Ojukwu saw this as a declaration of war. 3 days later, Biafra was born and the bloodbath began. For 30 months, Nigeria tore itself apart. Biafran children starved to death on TV. The world watched. The world did nothing. Gowon's government blockaded Biafra. No food, no medicine, and no mercy. Images of skeletal children became global symbols. But Gowon's response?
Starvation is a legitimate weapon of war.
By 1970, Biafra surrendered.
And I would like, therefore, to take this opportunity to say that I, Major General Philip Effiong, officer administering the government of the Republic of Biafra, now wish to make the following declaration. That we affirm we are loyal Nigerian citizens and accept the authority of the federal military government of Nigeria. That we accept the existing administrative and political structure of the Federation of Nigeria. That any future constitutional arrangement will be worked out by representatives of the people of Nigeria. That the Republic of Biafra hereby ceases to exist.
Ojukwu fled to Ivory Coast. Gowon declared,
No victor, no vanquished.
but everyone knew the North had won. And Gowon? He was now a war hero. But the victory celebration was short-lived. By 1970 to 1975, Nigeria discovers massive oil reserves. Money floods the country. Gowon's government is swimming in cash, but during this occasion he loses his mind. And suddenly, the humble soldier becomes a king. He builds mansions, buys fleets of cars, and his ministers steal billions. One contractor later admitted,
We inflated contracts by 300%. Nobody checked.
Gowon's famous quote from 1974,
Nigeria's problem is not money, but how to spend it.
But while Gowon partied, Nigeria was bleeding. Infrastructure collapsed and corruption exploded. The Nigerian disease was born. Gowon promised to hand over power to civilians in 1976, but in October 1974, he made an announcement which says,
The 1976 handover is postponed indefinitely.
He never knew he made the biggest mistake with this decision. The military was furious, especially the young officers who fought in Biafra. They risked their lives for what? So Gowon could become a dictator? One of those officers was Murtala Muhammad, the same man who put Gowon in power. And now, he was planning to remove him. But Gowon had no idea what was coming. By July 29, 1975, exactly 9 years after Gowon took power, he's in Kampala, Uganda for an OAU summit. He's shopping for souvenirs and laughing with diplomats. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, military tanks are rolling into Dodan Barrack. At 6 a.m., Brigadier Murtala Muhammad announces on radio,
Gowon is no longer head of state.
Just like that, bloodless and effortless, Gowon hears the news on BBC World Service in an hotel room in Uganda. His reaction? He laughed. He thought it was a joke. Then his security detail abandoned him. One by one, they left. Gowon called the British High Commission and said,
Can I get asylum?
The British said,
We'll think about it.
Nigeria told Uganda.
Send him back, or we'll invade.
Uganda said,
He's your problem.
Eventually, Britain gave him exile. He lived in London for the next 13 years, studying at Warwick University. A 40-year-old ex-dictator sitting in British lecture halls. Insane, right? But here's the craziest part. Gowon eventually came back to Nigeria and nobody arrested him. No trial and no punishment. He became an elder statesman and a respected leader. How? Because Nigeria has short memory. And because Gowon knew where everyone's bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. But one question haunts historians to this day. Let's be real, Gowon's legacy is complicated. He started a war that killed millions. He became drunk on power and money, and he was overthrown while shopping for souvenirs. But there's one thing he did that changed Nigeria forever. The no victor, no vanquished policy after Biafra surrendered in 1970. The world expected massacres, revenge killings, and war crimes trials. But Gowon said no. He reintegrated Biafran soldiers into the Nigerian army. He gave Igbos their property back, and he declared amnesty for most Biafran leaders. Was it perfect? No. The £20 policy robbed Igbos of their savings. Economic marginalization continued for decades, but compared to other post-Civil War countries, Nigeria could have been Rwanda. Instead, it was just Nigeria. Messy, corrupt, but intact. And that's partly because of Gowon. Today, he's 91 years old, still alive, still giving interviews, and still claiming, "I did my best." Was he a hero, a villain, or just a pawn? And so there you have it, the untold story of how a nobody became Nigeria's head of state. One phone call, one lucky reassignment, and 9 years that changed Nigeria forever. But here's what I didn't tell you. The full British M16 files on Gowon's rise, they're being declassified in 2025. And what is inside will shock you. Next video drops those secret files. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Drop your village in the comments. And share this with one person who thinks they know Nigerian history. Because trust me, they don't. See you in the next one.